We got another crossover episode again. I'm Monty. You might be used to me on the Mighty Sharp Network, but we're doing something for Divine Discoveries, and it's a special show. We're talking about the history of gospel music. June is Black History Music Month, so we wanted to give our spin on it. And guys, I got a heavy hitter with me today. We were fortunate enough to have an artist on who, Deshandra, who's a great singer, but we have somebody who's really in the mix of gospel. He is the first person I go to for all new releases. He's always got his ear to the music scene. Every Friday I'm checking him out, who's hot, who's got something out. He's got over 100,000 followers just on Instagram. He is definitely in tune with the music scene, especially for gospel. Mr. Devontae Arbe, aka the Gospel Guru. How you doing, bro?
What's up, man? How are you?
Good. It's been a minute. Been a minute since
Yes,
we
sir.
talked, but man, so great to have you on. So
Good to be here,
just in
man.
the theme of what we're talking about, I want to know for you, when you hear gospel music, when you hear that phrase, what's kind of the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear that?
Man, honestly, church. I
Yeah,
know that might sound cliche, but that's the first thing that comes to mind just because, of course, gospel music and church are synonymous.
most definitely. Most definitely. For me, it is when you hear gospel, I think church organ, you know what I mean? I think,
Mhm.
hand
Mhm.
clapping, foot
Yeah.
stomping, things like that. For sure. So what's the earliest for you? Like, do you remember as a child, like the earliest connection you remember having with gospel music itself?
Oh, man. Probably Kirk Franklin's Stomp, and
Okay.
then also the Clark Sisters' Miracle album.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, for sure.
And
So,
more when Daryl Coley, When Sunday Comes.
man, now that's interesting you say that because I remember where I was. I heard it was Bobby Jones gospel, and it was after church, and I was in the basement and I had the TV on, and I happened to catch it right when it started. And I was like, is that Daryl Coley? And man, that song blew me away. I said, wow,
Yeah.
that's them runs and all of that.
Yeah.
Of course, RIP to the great late Pastor Daryl Coley. So in your arena, man, as you cover gospel and you cover events and you're really a person on the scene that helps to get the word out for these artists and things like that.
Mhm.
I'd like to know from an industry level, what are the changes that you've kind of seen gospel go through, be it good or bad, that you've kind of noticed in your years of doing what you do?
Oh wow, so many, man. I feel like there's a shift every 5 years or so.
Uh-huh.
But
Uh-huh.
when I first started, of course, um, actual physical sales, they were really big. You could go to, Walmart, Target, Best Buy, and peruse the music section. Um, Music was released on Tuesdays.
Yeah,
So,
it sure
a lot of
was.
changes. I miss
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. That's man, that's crazy you said that too, because we used to buy the CDs and Tuesday used to be the day, now it's Friday,
Now, Friday, thanks to Beyonce.
Yeah, right. And the thing is, so even with the coverage, because for you, social media has been a big thing.
Right.
But back in the day before social media, I don't know if you were really doing what you do now, kind of before the social media. But can you even talk about how it was covered in terms of the eventizing of it, if you can remember anything like that?
Oh man, the earliest memories can remember about coverage would be Bobby Jones Gospel.
Hmm.
My dad was big on publications. He would subscribe to Ebony and Jet, and sometimes they would have excerpts in there about
Yeah,
gospel music or
yeah.
the gospel artists would grace the cover.
Hmm.
And then as I got older, just going to the different websites, whether it's Gospel Pundit or
Oh,
Gospel
wow.
City, Gospel Flavor, they would really give us, those updates with events and,
Yeah.
just really make you wish that you were there. And the thorough album reviews, all that good stuff. It
Yeah.
was just exciting.
That takes me back. You just said a couple of those websites, man. I do remember checking those. Because it's funny, man. For me, even, I came up in the Kojic church,
Same
and
here.
Yeah, a lot of times you would go to the convention and you would start to hear music that you hadn't heard,
Right,
regionally, things
right.
like that, or what they doing. I'm from Michigan, so what they doing down south, or what they doing on the West Coast, what's New York doing? And back then, before even internet, that was kind of our, oh, okay, this is what that sound is, okay, like that. And then the internet, of course, brought everything together, for sure. And again, shout out because Bobby Jones was a big showcase
A
for.
staple.
Yeah, I mean, every Sunday night I was checking out who was on there. I remember John B. Key come on there. You know what I'm saying? Fred Hammond, and like, oh, okay, and that was all we had for,
Yeah.
for every week until the
Yeah.
advent of more music coming out. So, I want to ask you then, do you feel like, and this is kind of always the question we kind of get with new generations, like you say, every couple 5 years, is there maybe too much of an emphasis on the music instead of the gospel, or do you feel like we've kind of maintained a good balance as these generations have gone on?
I would say it certainly has changed. But I do think there are, so let me say this. Um, Early 2000s, you had so many different, diverse. You had Tone, you had Jay
Mm,
Moss, you had Dietrich Haddon. Those are my big three.
yeah,
Um, all, men of gospel, but they all had their own lanes and would do what they, um, were gifted to do. Now I do feel like, which is not a bad thing, when it's a certain wave, and this is just not just gospel music. It's a certain wave. Everyone kind of gravitates to that particular sound versus, sticking to what, Jay Moss wasn't trying to do what Dietrich Hatton was doing. Dietrich Hatton wasn't trying to do what Tone was doing. They were all doing their own thing. So I
yeah,
would say, it's a lot of trends happening and, a lot of, everybody gravitating toward that trend, if that makes sense. So I would say I kind of miss the diversity. It's still there,
mm,
but I feel like it's not as prevalent.
yeah, yeah. I think too because I've heard like singers say, of all walks in all kind of genres of music, like real singers, especially female singers, like, man, when I heard Kim Burrell, all her
Mhm.
runs, and it influenced me and things like that. And if you go back a generation, a lot of them were saying Karen Clark Sheard, or Dorinda and things like that. And being influenced, but then young people always want their own sound as well. So it's always been this thing where I don't want to listen to what my mama listened to, but I do like the runs. And I think gospel has been done a good job of always keeping that fabric woven, even with different iterations of it. And then you see like Kiera come out now, and Kiera is she's working with different producers, of course, than her mother and them worked with back in the day, but she still got that sound. You know what I mean? You can still hear, she still got a little growl in her too. that
It's an
that
entertainment.
yeah,
Yeah.
it still resonates. But um I want to ask you this then. Do you feel like, let me say, I'm gonna save the question, let me go to this other one first. So, do you feel like the church and the history of the church, you go back James Cleveland and all these ones, it seems like so many people that come out, even if they sing secular, just about everybody has the same early testimony. I started singing in church. I started in choir. Every musician, I started playing in church at church. How important, especially the black church, what is was and is it to give people that chance to actually kind of circulate their gift and grow and learn and things like that. Like, can you speak to that, especially the way you covered it?
Yeah, for sure. And I just have to say the church is so, or it used to be so pivotal and so many in different genres. I
Mm,
remember when R&B artists would drop albums and they couldn't do an album without a gospel song on it.
yeah, yeah.
You know, I feel like that's what's kind of missing from music across the board. I feel like the church and gospel music used to influence so many other genres, and you don't really hear that as much now. But to your question, and I'm sorry, what was your question? I got off. What was
No,
your question?
well, hold on. Let's stay there for a second because you made a good point. It used to be that
Mhm.
everybody from R&B, country western singers, everybody always they'd either do a gospel album or they do a gospel song, and they, because they knew what their roots were, regardless of what they and you kind of don't see that anymore, which could be for a lot of reasons. um, in terms of that. But I was just asking you about the influence of letting young singers, sing. Whitney Houston came up in the church singing, and young musicians, how important the church letting people have a showcase to, you know, back then in the church, if you could sing, just get up there, baby. Just start singing. You know what I'm saying? Just start playing five notes if you can. How important that was for forming careers.
Oh yeah, it's so important because the church it played an integral role in so many, people's careers because that's where they first, got to do their first solo or first got
Hmm.
the opportunity to play the keys. And I feel like you hear so many producers or musicians say they come from the church. They started in the church.
Hmm.
I know a lot of, mainstream producers grew up writing poetry. So I
Yeah,
feel like
yeah.
it's really fundamental in getting that start.
Most definitely. And you see some people, they'll come back, you know what I mean, and they'll, even learn and grasp. I always say everything in music to me starts with gospel, and gospel came from the church. But now I want to ask you this question, man, because like you say, you remember Kirk and different ones that came out. It's like all of a sudden with the information age and the way that we had technology, we really had some big time people, and they were selling, albums. I'll never forget. I saw Kurt Franklin on David Letterman, and for me and my friends, we were just like, wait, whoa, this is huge. Like, it's one thing to be on Bobby Jones, and no shade to that, but David Letterman was
Right.
mainstream. I couldn't believe it. Does gospel music need superstars, or is superstars a byproduct of how big gospel music became? I'm gonna ask you that.
I don't know if gospel music needs superstars, but of course we have them.
Hmm.
So I feel like I'm gonna talk my way through this. I feel like, I don't know if they're needed, but we have them. And I feel like they play an integral part in, helping gospel music, go different places outside of the church.
Yeah.
I don't think that was any of their intention to be a superstar.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't think it was Mary's intention to be a superstar per se, or Kirk's intention, but they were, like I was saying earlier, they were doing their brand of gospel, and
Hmm.
it took them to, different avenues and different spaces that, some more traditional artists might not have the opportunity to go,
Yeah.
which I feel like, that road is not for everyone. Some people are just, for, the church audience or, and then Mary has their audience and Kirk has his audience. Some people enjoy that traditional sound. Some people
Hmm.
want more, urban influence gospel music. So I feel like, there's something there for everybody. But to
Yeah.
answer your question, I don't think that was their intent. I just feel like that's where their gift took them.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's a byproduct of their gift making room for them.
Yeah, and you know what? I remember Marvin Sapp when never could have made it. Really just exploded. And I saw him be in some places that you didn't see gospel artists. Like I always kind of had a problem with the Grammys because the Grammys would have a rock and roll group that would perform during the Grammys, and they'd have a classical, they'd have an R&B, they'd have a rock group, and then they would never let a gospel artist. And I'm saying, if this is supposed to be about music as a whole, why can't? And then you finally they let, I would see him or Kirk, and my thing was, if I used to have such a resentment against that. I'm like, doesn't seem fair. Like they got a country act out here, but we can't have, and those guys were selling. And then you started to see it, and you started to see where, yeah, I don't think if you hear his story, he wasn't starting out to be a superstar like you said, but he kind of got to that height. That song made it so big, and it did allow him to go to some places, and you'd see some hands raised when he was singing that song. You see some tears from some people that didn't know God at all.